Welcome to Chapter Shift, the place where great books become life-changing ideas. Every week we explore the wisdom behind the world's most influential books so you can learn faster, think deeper, and grow with every chapter. Let's begin.
The Psychology of Money.
So, have you ever looked at someone's financial decisions and thought, are you completely literally out of your mind, right? We've all been there. Today, we're digging into money. It's a topic that affects every single one of us, yet it somehow manages to make genuinely brilliant, highly educated people do spectacularly dumb things. But, spoiler alert, and this is the whole premise of this explainer, no matter how insane it looks from the outside, nobody is actually crazy. Let's just dive right into this with a tale of two guys. In corner number one, you have a literal tech genius. I'm talking about a guy who designed and patented a key component in Wi-Fi routers in his 20s. Startups, buyouts, the whole shebang. Wildly successful. But he also had this habit of carrying around a literal brick of $100 bills. And, just for kicks, he and his buddies would go down to the Pacific Ocean and skip $1,000 gold coins into the sea like rocks, just chucking them into the water. In corner number two, we have Ronald Reed. Ronald was a janitor. He fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years, swept floors at JCPenney for 17 years, and, his main hobby was chopping firewood.
Now, that tech genius who was skipping gold coins into the ocean, he went completely, spectacularly broke. But Ronald Reed, our floor-sweeping, firewood-chopping janitor, when he passed away in 2014 at the age of 92, he made international headlines. Because out of the nearly 3 million Americans who died that year, fewer than 4,000 had a net worth over $8 million. Let that sink in. $8 million. He didn't win the lottery. He didn't inherit a dime. He just patiently saved what little he could, put it in blue-chip stocks, and let time do the heavy lifting.
Now let's look at the absolute anti-janitor. Meet Richard Fiscone. He is everything Ronald Reed was not. Harvard-educated, MBA, massively successful executive at Merrill Lynch. So successful, in fact, he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. He even made one of those 40 under 40 lists. And to really top it all off, he borrowed heavily to expand an 18,000 square foot mansion in Connecticut. This place, get this, had 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages, and 11 bathrooms. 11! I mean, if you have 11 bathrooms, you aren't living, you are officially just showing off to your own digestive system. It costs $90,000 a month just to keep the lights on. But then the 2008 financial crisis hit. And that crisis turned the Harvard MBA's mansion into literal dust. High debt and illiquid assets totally wiped him out. So by 2008, he's standing in front of a bankruptcy judge delivering this exact quote: "I currently have no income." The Palm Beach house foreclosed. The Greenwich mansion sold at a massive loss. Richard was greedy and Ronald was patient. And that single behavioral difference completely eclipsed a massive education and experience gap. So I gotta ask you, in what other industry on planet Earth does this happen? Seriously, in what other field does a guy sweeping floors with zero formal training massively outperform a Harvard-educated elite with the best connections in the world? Can you imagine a janitor stepping into an operating room and performing a better open heart transplant than a surgeon? Like, "Excuse me, doctor, hand me the mop, I got this." No. Or designing a skyscraper better than top architects? It's impossible. It literally never happens. So the crucial point is, financial success is not a hard science. It is a soft skill. It's psychology. Finance is overwhelmingly taught like math, right? You put data into a formula, the formula tells you to save 10% and build an emergency fund, and it just assumes you'll execute it like a robot. But knowing what to do tells you absolutely nothing about what happens in your head when you actually try to do it. Your behavior is the undisputed heavyweight champion over your intelligence. Which brings us to a really uncomfortable truth about how we view the world. Go ahead, count the zeros on that. That insanely tiny fraction of a percent represents exactly how much of the world's financial history you have personally experienced. No matter who you are, your personal lived experience is practically zero. But here's the kicker. That tiny microscopic fraction of a percentage point, it makes up about 80% of how you think the entire world works. We just arrogantly assume our little bubble represents universal truth. A person who grew up in poverty views risk totally differently than the child of a wealthy banker. An Australian who hasn't seen a recession in 30 years has a completely different brain than someone who got wiped out in America back in 2008. I absolutely love this quote from John F. Kennedy. He's running for president, and a reporter asks him what he remembers about the Great Depression, the defining economic tragedy of the era. And JFK essentially says, Well, my family had one of the great fortunes of the world. We had bigger houses, more servants. I really did not learn about the Depression until I read about it at Harvard. I mean, it's almost hilarious how utterly blind the ultra-wealthy can be. To JFK, the Depression was a syllabus requirement. To millions of others, it was a generational trauma they carried forever. And that's exactly it. Some lessons just have to be experienced before they can be understood. You cannot genuinely recreate the power of fear and uncertainty in a classroom. A spreadsheet can tell you the historic frequency of a bear market, sure, but a spreadsheet cannot model the pure, gut-wrenching agony of coming home, looking at your kids across the dinner table, and wondering if a mistake you made with your investments is going to ruin their future. It all comes down to the dumb luck of when you were born, and this brilliantly illustrates that. If you were born in 1970, the stock market went up almost tenfold during your teens and 20s. An absolute gold mine. Your brain is hardwired to think stocks are a rocket ship. But born in 1950, the market went literally nowhere during those exact same formative years. Adjusted for inflation, zero growth. Two equally smart people, separated only by their birth year, walking around with completely opposite realities on whether the stock market is a miracle or an absolute dud. Same thing goes for inflation. Born in the 60s, you remember your teens and 20s as an era where prices shot up more than threefold. You remember waiting in gas lines. You remember your paycheck buying noticeably less every single month. You are scarred by it. Born in 1990? Inflation was so low for most of your life you probably thought it was just a setting on a bicycle pump until recently. You cannot expect these two groups to trust the same financial advice. Sometimes this gap in perspective gives you absolute whiplash. The New York Times ran a story about the atrocious working conditions at Foxconn, the massive electronics manufacturer in China. Americans were rightfully outraged by the idea of a sweatshop. But a Chinese worker's nephew wrote into the comments with a massive reality check. He said his aunt chose to work in that sweatshop because her previous job was prostitution. She vastly preferred being exploited by a factory boss for a few dollars over the alternative. What seems like a horrible human rights violation to one group was viewed as a dignified upgrade to another based entirely on their local economy. So whatever financial decision a person makes, it makes sense to them in that moment. It checks the boxes they need to check based on the mental model they've built from their own unique life. They might be misinformed, they might be terrible at math, they might be falling for rotten marketing, but in their head, the story they are telling themselves adds up. Which brings us to the ultimate question. Why on earth do broke people buy lottery tickets? I mean, Americans spend more on lottery tickets than movies, video games, music, sporting events, and books combined. And who buys them? The lowest income households spend over $400 a year on tickets. These are the exact same people who tell surveys they couldn't come up with $400 in an emergency. To most of us, blowing your emergency fund on a scratch-off sounds absolutely 100% insane. But look at the logic underneath it. Imagine living paycheck to paycheck. Saving feels impossible. Your wages aren't going up. You can't afford nice vacations or health insurance or a home in a safe neighborhood. You look at wealthy people and realize you are never going to get what they take for granted. For these folks, buying a lottery ticket isn't a math error. It is literally the only time in their lives they get to hold a tangible dream in their hands. They are paying for a moment of hope. You don't have to agree with it. It's still a terrible financial decision, but you can finally understand it. Let's move to and see how this builds, because aside from our wildly different life experiences, there is one monumental reason why we are all so clumsy with money. We are all basically financial newborns. Humans have had currency for thousands of years, sure, but the modern financial game of saving and investing for retirement, it is practically an infant. Think about it. Before World War II, you just worked until you died. That was the retirement plan. The 401k, the absolute backbone of modern American retirement, wasn't even invented until 1978. The Roth IRA, that wasn't born until 1998. Guys, if the Roth IRA were a person, it would barely be old enough to legally buy a beer. Index funds are less than 50 years old. Widespread consumer debt and credit cards only really took off after World War II. So here is our massive reality check. Step 1, we are all newbies. We are like domesticated dogs that were wild wolves 10,000 years ago, trying to flawlessly play a financial game that is barely 40 years old. There's not ancient wisdom here. We are entirely winging it. Step 2, no one is actually crazy. We are just trying to make sense of a brand new system using the tiny, distorted lens of our own lives.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. The next time you stress over a money decision or you judge your neighbor for theirs, ask yourself, are you making a crazy choice, or are you just playing a brand new 40-year-old game equipped with only a fraction of a percent of the rules? Give yourself some grace and cut others some slack.